It was supposed to be a lightning strike-ia, quick war, a swift return to glory. Britain and France, masters of empires for centuries, believed they could humble a small desert nation, reclaim control of a vital waterway, and remind the world who still pulled the strings. But instead of restoring their prestige, they exposed their impotence. In the autumn of 1956, fighting colonial powers, joined by the newly formed State of Israel, launched a secret military operation against Egypt. Their objective? Seize the Suez Canal, overthrow President Gamal Abdel Nasser, and restore Western control over a vital artery of global trade. It should have been simple, but it wasn't. Within days, global condemnation rained down. The Soviet Union issued veiled nuclear threats. The United States, humiliated and enraged at not being consulted, pulled financial and diplomatic support. And as their economies trembled and troops stalled under international pressure, Britain and France did something unthinkable for imperial nations. They retreated. The Suez Crisis was more than a botched military intervention. It was the moment when the world realized the age of European empires was over, and the Cold War, ordered not by London or Paris, but by Washington and Moscow, had arrived. But how did this moment come to be? How did a narrow waterway in the Egyptian desert ignite a geopolitical inferno that redrew the contours of global power? And why does its shadow still stretch into the conflicts of our modern Middle East? To understand the crisis of 1956, one must first understand the canal that triggered it. The Suez Canal, sort of a man-made marvel, was opened in 1869 after a decade of backbreaking labor, dug through the harsh Egyptian desert. It offered ships a shortcut between Europe and Asia, slashing thousands of miles off the traditional voyage around Africa. Its construction was overseen by French diplomat Ferdinand de Lesseps, who famously called the canal the highway to India. Funded by European investors, the canal quickly became the lifeblood of the British Empire. By the 1870s, Britain, facing mounting strategic competition, moved to take partial control. In 1875, the cash-strapped Khedive of Egypt sold his 44% share in the Suez Canal Company to the British government. Ironically, to pay off debts to British banks. Britain, once skeptical of the canal's strategic importance, became its staunchest protector. 80% of the ships passing through were British. For London, Suez wasn't just a canal. It was an umbilical cord to India, the empire's crown jewel. And it was a cord Britain would not let be severed. In 1882, faced with an Egyptian nationalist revolt, Britain invaded and occupied Egypt under the guise of restoring order. For the next 60 years, British troops would remain nominally guests, in practice rulers. Egypt's independence in 1922 was only partial. True control still flowed through British administrators, British commanders, and British pipelines. But empires do not last forever, and by the end of World War II, the world had changed. India, Pakistan, and Burma had broken free. Resistance was growing in Kenya, Malaya, and Cyprus. In Egypt, resentment simmered against a monarchy seen as weak and complicit, and against foreign troops still stationed in the Canal Zone. Then, in 1952, it all boiled over. A group of nationalist army officers, the Free Officers Movementover, threw King Farouk in a bloodless coup. The monarchy was abolished, and from the tumult, a new leader emerged, Colonel Gamal Abdel Nasser. A charismatic figure with a military mind and a nationalist heart, Nasser was determined to rid Egypt of foreign influence and lead the Arab world into a new era of independence. But as the young republic stared down its colonial past, a much colder war loomed in the background. Gamal Abdel Nasser was not merely a military man or a political opportunist. To millions of Arabs across the Middle East, he represented something far greater, a rebirth. Nasser's dream was bold Egyptian modernization, Arab unity, and resistance to foreign domination. But dreams require resources. And for Nasser, that meant building the Aswan High Dama massive hydroelectric project that would transform Egypt's economy by controlling the Nile and generating crucial power. He needed funding, and in the age of Cold War chess, both superpowers saw an opportunity. To the west, Egypt was a vital bulwark against Soviet expansion into the Arab world. To the Soviet Union, it was a potential prize to pry from Western hands. And Nasser, fiercely independent and shrewdly pragmatic, knew how to play both sides. Initially, the United States and Britain stepped forward. They offered funding for the dam, hoping to anchor Egypt to the Western sphere. But then came a turning point tone that revealed the fractures beneath the Cold War's diplomatic facade. In early 1955, Nasser signed an arms deal not with the West, but with Czechoslovakia, a Soviet-client state. The deal delivered tanks, MiG fighter jets, and radar systems, exactly what Egypt needed to modernize its military. To Arab observers, it was a triumph. To Washington and London, a betrayal. When Nasser also moved to recognize communist China, the West snapped. In July 1956, the United States and Britain abruptly withdrew their offer to fund the Aswan Dam. It was a miscalculation of historic proportions. 10 days later, on the 26th of July, Nasser struck back with a move no Western leader anticipated. Standing before a cheering crowd in Alexandria, he declared that Egypt would nationalize the Suez Canal Company. No more foreign profits. No more outside control. The revenue from the canal, he proclaimed, would be used to fund the Aswan Dam. We dug the canal with our lives, our skulls, our bones, our blood. The Suez Canal belongs to us. It was a bold and entirely legal move. The canal itself had always been Egyptian territory, and Nasser promised to compensate shareholders fairly, but legality was beside the point. In London and Paris, the reaction was immediate and visceral. To British Prime Minister Sir Anthony Eden, Nasser's nationalization of the Suez Canal was an unforgivable act of defiance zone that struck at Britain's prestige, pride, and power. Eden was no stranger to crises. As Foreign Secretary during World War II, he had stood with Churchill against appeasement. But the years had taken their toll. Now, plagued by ill health and dependent on stimulants, Eden saw Nasser not as a modern nationalist, but as a second Hitlerian Arab dictator who needed to be crushed before others followed his example. In Paris, Prime Minister Guy Mollet shared Eden's fury. France was embroiled in a brutal colonial war in Algeria, and Nasser had become a symbol and supporter of Algerian nationalists. His pan-Arab rhetoric and open support for anti-colonial movements posed a direct threat to France's empire. Together, Britain and France began to plot a military response, but they needed a pretext, and they found it in Israel. The Israeli government under Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion had its own reasons to confront Nasser. Egypt had imposed a blockade on the Straits of Tiran, cutting off Israeli access to the Red Sea. Egyptian-backed raids by Palestinian Fedayeen fighters were increasing along Israel's borders, and the rearming of Egypt with Soviet weapons loomed large in Tel Aviv's strategic calculations. Behind closed doors, a plan was formed. In Sevres, France, Representatives from Britain, France, and Israel met in secret. Their plan was as daring as it was duplicitous. Israel would invade Egypt and seize the Sinai Peninsula. Then, Britain and France would issue an ultimatum to both sides to withdraw from the vicinity of the Suez Canal. An ultimatum they knew Egypt would reject. This would provide the cover for Anglo-French forces to intervene, restore peace, and retake the canal. It was a geopolitical farce cloaked in the language of peacekeeping, and it would soon be exposed to the world